Homefront is one of the most generic modern military shooters I've ever played. Don't play it. Okay, in all seriousness, if you have played a Call of Duty game, you've basically played Homefront. It feels exactly the same, the only difference is the setting. Before we get to that, let's talk about the graphics real quick. I played this on PC, and as a port, it's okay. It even has a field of view slider. I didn't really have any major issues, with the exception of trying to launch the game. When I tried to launch the game, I got this obnoxious error telling me that physics wasn't installed correctly. When I clicked OK, nothing would happen. So I took to Google to try to figure out how to launch the game, and what I found was people saying to install the legacy versions of PhysX. I did that, and it didn't work. Eventually, after about 30 minutes of screwing around, I came across a thread that told me to just launch the game through the exe file in the folder instead of through Steam. This worked. Seriously, that's the fix? Okay, whatever, I launched the game, let's play. Graphically, this game is really not that great. Obviously, it's outdated for today's standards, but this game came out in 2011. Here's a few other games that came out in 2011. Battlefield 3, Bulletstorm, Crysis 2, Portal 2, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, Fear 3, The Original Rage, Killzone 3, Resistance 3, Red Orchestra 2, Serious Sam 3, and Call of Juarez, The Cartel. Moving away from that game, you can see a theme. Most games that came out in 2011 looked better than Homefront. It didn't look glaringly bad, but it didn't really impress. With that said, I can say the aesthetic is particularly stunning. The art style definitely holds up the game. There's a significant amount of product placement in this game. As you're walking down the road, you will see a White Castle or a Hooters. Now, we don't actually have White Castle up here in the Pacific Northwest. We don't have most chains in the Pacific Northwest for that matter. We're pretty secluded from the rest of the country. In fact, for that matter, you probably think we're more connected to California than we really are. For example, I'm in Portland, Oregon. Portland, Oregon is the furthest south big city in the Pacific Northwest. It's still further north than Toronto. The next closest big city south of Portland is San Francisco, 630 miles away. So we don't get most big chains up here, instead we usually have our own. We don't get In-N-Out or Whataburger, instead we get Burgerville. With that said, it would mean a lot more to me to see something like Burgerville taken over by a foreign military than just some random made-up establishment. So in this case, product placement doesn't bother me. In fact, I would actually prefer it. It's cleverly interwoven into the game. From here we move on to the most interesting part of this game, the story. The opening cutscene of Homefront tells a story of how North Korea became powerful enough to overtake South Korea, then Japan, then America. It's an interesting situation to find America overtaken by a foreign superpower, and the intro of the game tries to do this justice. However, it tries to be profound and oftentimes feels forced. While the concept behind it is strong, the execution is not. In every situation where the game tries to be profound, you are on a rail. In this case, you are in a bus, driving through the city, seeing what's going on. It doesn't feel like the game is showing me why I should feel emotions, instead it's forcing me and telling me how I should feel. It even does that cliche of a baby crying louder than everything else happening. Louder than gunfire, louder than people yelling. Somehow. Because, you know, it's a baby. You're supposed to feel emotional. Feel bad for the baby. This did not make me feel emotional, it just made me feel really annoyed that a baby was crying constantly throughout the game. If you want a much better example of when a game does this right, look at Half-Life 2. In the opening of Half-Life 2, you were never on rails, and you're never in a cutscene. You physically feel involved with the world. You physically are oppressed along with the other citizens. Your actions will have different responses. When an armed Combine tells you to pick up a can and blocks your path, your response of either putting it in the can or throwing it back at him will have different results. And something this simple shows you that if you don't comply, they're just going to beat you. In Homefront, you were instead sitting in a bus, looking out the window, looking at literal fire squads without the ability to do anything. And I don't mean stopping these firing squads, I mean at least feeling involved. It just feels very forced. And the same applies to the other set piece of diving into a literal mass grave. This was practically a cutscene. It didn't feel like I was controlling anything, I pressed E to jump into bodies. The level of interaction and atmospheric storytelling needs to be high when it comes to video games. You can't basically take a movie and try to shove it into press E to make things happen to feel emotions. If you want a better example of doing a set piece like this right, it's Spec Ops: The Line. I won't spoil anything and talk about the part I am thinking about, but if you've played Spec Ops: The Line, you know what I'm referring to here. To add on top of all of this, the writing in Homefront is particularly bad. I just played the game, and I can't tell you what the main characters' names are. Your main character has virtually no reason to join the Resistance. You apparently are an ex-military pilot that gets pretty much abducted by the Resistance, for one mission later on in the game that I'll talk about. The supporting cast is nothing more than someone that just yells the word fuck every once in a while. Anyway, point being, Homefront has an incredibly strong premise and a very bad execution. But as I have said before, if the gameplay is good, then a bad story can be ignored. This game sucks. The gameplay is just as bad. If you have played a Call of Duty game before, you have played this game. This game is bootleg Call of Duty, but worse. The interest in these styles of games for me is generally seeing what unique guns they have thrown into the game, and then of course the gunplay. Homefront fails in both regards. In a game that has Koreans taking over Americans, most guns you use are just generic American weapons. An M4, an 870, an M249 SAW. You use one Korean weapon and that's it. I'm not saying go crazy and put in some other weapons that you wouldn't see in this situation, but I would like to see some more Korean weapons, just something more interesting. I mean, hell, the game has one pistol, just an M9, and that's it. It also has one shotgun, the 870. Overall, the weapon list is not particularly exciting. To make things worse, the gunplay itself is not that great. Guns don't feel like they have any recoil, it just feels like they're slowly pushing your screen up, nor do they feel like they have any impact. When a bullet hits a wall, it makes a small decal and that's about it. It doesn't feel like a gun. When you shoot an enemy, they do a slight stagger animation, but if you didn't have a hit marker, it wouldn't feel like you were shooting them at all. In this case, the hit marker is kind of a cop-out for weapons that feel totally pathetic otherwise. The reloading animations are okay, but nothing really that great. Again, this is the same year that Battlefield 3 came out. As for the actual combat, it's bootleg Call of Duty as I have said. Brain-dead AI run at you speaking a foreign language, you shoot at them, they eventually die, more come out at you out of a clown closet, they shoot back at you, you sit behind cover waiting for your ult to come out, you pop out until they're all dead. All while this is happening, your friendly NPC is constantly yelling at you to do something. That's a huge pet peeve of mine when it comes to video games. When a friendly NPC wants you to do something, so they just repeat the same sentence over and over and over until you do it. Shut up, I'm trying to find ammo and different guns. It's particularly pointless to do it in this game because you have a nav point telling you what to do. There's a few times this game tries to spice things up, and these are terrible. The first one is the Goliath, which I'm more indifferent about. This is just a big wheeled drone with rockets on it, and you get something to point at enemies and click and make them die. Yeah, whatever. This doesn't really add or take anything away from the game. The second thing does take away from the game. Forced stealth sections, man, I love these. Why does every game feel the need to add these? This is basically their version of All Gillied Up, except for it's fucking terrible. All you're doing the entire time is just following your NPCs and then shooting the enemies they tell you to shoot. The first time I did this mission, they put a little marker over one of the enemies, and I figured, well, they're gonna have me shoot him anyway, so I shot him, and it instantly failed me. Go back to the last checkpoint, listen to them talking all over again. When I got back to that point where they wanted me to shoot that enemy, all I had to do was wait a second longer until they told me, now you can shoot the enemy. Are you kidding me? This is the level of linear we're talking about here. This is how scripted this game is. And the third time they try to mix up the game is a flying section. Oh boy, we get to fly a helicopter. I also hate these missions. They're not fun. Thankfully, this helicopter doesn't control like ass. However, you have such limited space to use it that it might as well. This is an escort mission. You're flying in a helicopter defending oil tanks. Joy. It drags on for way too long, and you can't get too far away from the oil tankers or you'll leave the mission area. This would be understandable if it gave me room to move. I'm in a helicopter, I need to avoid rockets, but I can't because it's only around 50 feet near the oil tankers. So even though the helicopter doesn't control poorly, you just have very limited space where you can use it. And the only thing you're really doing is just waiting for these oil tankers to drive all the way through the suburban area. To make things worse, this is the sole reason why the Resistance grabbed you into the Resistance. You're an ex-military pilot. They needed someone to fly the helicopter. This is literally the only reason you're involved. What happens if at the beginning of the game, your main character goes, no, I don't want to shoot anyone, and leaves? The game just ends, I guess. Apparently, the sole reason you needed these oil tankers was to deliver them to the American military so they could try to take back San Francisco. And this is where the final mission happens. You're fighting on the Golden Gate Bridge. It's some amazing imagery, but that's pretty much all you're going to get out of this. This mission is the most generic climax you could ever have. You have constant enemies streaming out at you and you have to constantly push through them. You get a nav point to shoot a certain enemy, you get to shoot missiles from above, and for some reason you can die while doing this. And then the climax is a turret segment where you fight another Goliath. Which, by the way, the turrets in this game have a ridiculously high sensitivity, I don't know why. Thankfully, you're not required to be precise while you're in these turrets, otherwise it would be impossible. By the way, I'd like to point out that you were on a rail on this turret on a Humvee, apparently having countermeasures to stop rockets from hitting you. The game doesn't tell you this and then just instantly kills you if you don't do that fast enough. How am I supposed to react fast enough if I don't even know that's an option? So yeah, scripted set piece that just instantly kills you, reset to checkpoint. Nice. Anyway, once you finally kill this damn thing, A cutscene happens, you blow up a bunch of enemies on the Golden Gate Bridge, and the game just abruptly ends. Yeah, that's just the end of the game. This game is only 3 hours long. At this point, that's a redeeming factor. And the curious part about that is that when I go to stream a game, I typically look up a long play to get an idea of how long the game is. And generally that long play is about an hour or so shorter than what I actually get. But every single long play I've seen of Homefront has been around 3 hours exactly. This game is so scripted that everyone gets the same exact experience with no deviation. Like I said, it's basically bootleg Call of Duty. Very rarely did I feel this game was the worst thing I ever played. I never felt like it was good, but I wasn't entirely wanting to die. I just felt that it was the most generic modern military shooter I have ever played. Or as Yahtzee from Zero Punctuation puts it, the standard spunk gargle wee wee. To put it short, it's a product of the Call of Duty craze, when everyone wanted more Call of Duty, and boy, they got more Call of Duty, but it just wasn't good. That's all I really have to say about the campaign. Apparently the multiplayer was really good, but I never got a chance to play it back in the day. It was supposedly a mix of Battlefield combat and Call of Duty combat with some weird objectives and some new things thrown in, but again, I never got a chance to play it, and the game, multiplayer-wise, is dead today. I'm sure you can find some footage of the multiplayer when it was active and get a proper opinion on that, but I can't speak on it. That's about all I have to say about Homefront's campaign. If things go right, then I'll make Homefront the Revolution be my next video, so we'll see how that goes. Thank you to everyone that joined me over on Twitch. If you want to join me in the future and hang out, my Twitch is twitch.tv/JarekTheGamingDragon. If you subscribe, you get to see my videos ahead of time. The same thing goes for my patrons over on patreon.com/Jarek4, along with some other tiers if you want to look at those. Thank all of you guys for watching, and I'll see you next video.